Are you all familiar with a disease called facial arteriovenous malformation? I was born with this condition, causing a large bump to form at the center of my face. This is a congenital disease where arteries and veins, which normally have different roles, somehow become connected, allowing blood to flow between them and resulting in a large blood clot in that area. From a young age, I underwent numerous surgeries, each one causing further distortion of my face. And during my school years, particularly in elementary school, I was terribly teased by the boys in my class. This facial disorder, impossible to hide no matter how hard I tried, led to severe self-consciousness. I honestly thought I would end my life without ever experiencing love or marriage, believing there would be no one who could love someone with such an ugly appearance. I seriously thought so, at least until I met him. I, Sophia, was a hopelessly negative person, lacking self-confidence, and recognized by others as such. Although I was somewhat influenced by what people said about my disease, the existence of my family, especially my sister, was what really exasperated my complex. You see, my sister Mia has beautiful double-fold eyelids, long lashes, a perfectly shaped nose. She's as pretty as a doll and is often complimented. My parents were extremely proud of her and frequently gifted her new clothes, shoes, and hair accessories. In contrast, my ugliness, a product of my disease, was treated as if I didn't exist. They'd say, "It'd be pitiful for Mia to be seen as siblings with such an ugly sister." For this reason, my parents did not want me to spend much time with my sister. However, Mia didn't care about my disease at all. She treated me normally, even giving me the toys and hair accessories she'd received, and defending me against those who made comments about my face. She was always there for me. While I love and cherish her for being such a saving grace in my life, my parents' love was always directed at her. They showed no interest in time. And for instance, even if Mia got grades in the 70s, they would compliment her. "Getting this high is incredible! Our Mia is not only pretty, but also good at studying. We're truly proud of her." But no matter how well I did on a test, they would always dismiss it with, "You know, being good at studying isn't enough to get you through life. In this world, even if you're not very smart, you can get by if you're attractive and pleasant. Since you're not good looking, I think you're going to have a hard life." When I found a pretty dress I liked, they'd say, "It might look good on Mia, but it wouldn't suit your face. You'll just become a laughingstock, so you better not wear it." When I showed interest in makeup and bought a magazine with my own allowance, they'd tell me, "Makeup can't cover up to your level. It's a waste of time." They kept comparing me to Mia, and every single thing I did was denied, and I lost confidence, more and more. Mia often protested against my parents' attitude towards me, but that just made things worse. That's when I realized there really is no place for me in this family. And it's not like I had a place at school either. I was teased by the boys in my class with nicknames like Monster or Face Weapon, and there were times when I was avoided because people said they might catch my disease if they touched me. Even in middle school, although the treatment wasn't as harsh, there were still boys who would grimace just by me being next to them. And while no one would say anything to me directly, I would often hear whispers about me. But what hurt the most was being made the subject of a punishment game. There used to be a game where the person who lost had to confess their feelings to someone in the class, and I was often the target of that punishment game. Of course, I knew they were only confessing because they had lost a game, so I politely declined. But then they go around saying, "I got rejected by that monster girl!" And I was yelled at by one of the boys I had turned down, saying, "Don't get all high and mighty just because it's a punishment game, ugly." At the time, it seemed so selfish and unfair to me, but I was convinced that my face was a sin. I thought I was causing discomfort to others just by being there. I was filled with guilt. During my years in elementary and middle school, I had no good memories of boys at all. But there was once, just once, when I fell in love with a boy in my class. This happened in my sophomore year of high school. A boy from my class, whom I happened to be seated with after the classes were shuffled, would treat me like any other person, without making fun of or avoiding my face. He would greet me with a good morning, every day as our seats were adjacent. I knew full well that he didn't have any feelings for me, but his single greeting brought me so much joy in the face of constant ridicule and avoidance that I naturally began to like him. However, I didn't really want to date him or anything like that. I just wanted this pleasant time to last as long as it could. But day by day, I felt more and more that I liked the boy, and after worrying about what to do, I asked my sister for advice, and she said, "I think it's a good idea to just tell him how you feel." After much deliberation, I decided to tell him how I felt. So I left a letter expressing my feelings in his desk. A few days later, I noticed something strange about the atmosphere in the class when I arrived at school. It was as if everyone was murmuring and glancing in my direction. As I was wondering what was going on, the boy, who had arrived at school before me, approached me and asked, "Hey, did you put this letter in my desk?" I responded by silently nodding, my gaze fixed to the ground. In that moment, I heard a sound above my head as if something was tearing, and the next moment, pieces of my torn letter were falling into my sight. It's troublesome when something like this happens. What are you going to do if strange rumors start spreading? You fell in love just because I greeted you out of politeness? How inexperienced in love are you? I didn't mean anything by it. If I gave you the wrong impression, I'm sorry. He said this, and for some reason, the class erupted in applause and cheers. And I heard comments like, "Wow, you've got guts," and "That's a bit sad, isn't it?" After that, my memory is a blur, and the next thing I knew, I was at home. But I don't remember anything about the journey. All I can remember is the feeling of guilt and despair. After that incident, I couldn't bring myself to go to school anymore, and I stopped attending. When my parents heard about what happened, instead of being on my side, they said, "His reaction was justified. You caused trouble, so you should apologize." Eventually, they began to scold me for not going to school for such a trivial reason, and tried to force me to go, but I just couldn't get myself to move. In the end, I dropped out of high school and became a recluse. After I became a shut-in, my older sister was worried and repeatedly tried to communicate with me. In contrast, our parents would either verbally abuse me in front of my room every morning or forcefully enter my room to berate me directly. They'd hurl insults such as, "We never should have had you," or "You're such a disgrace," causing me to despair every day, wondering why I even existed. Apparently, my sister noticed my situation and consulted our grandparents on our mother's side. The following day, they came to hear my story, and after learning about the events at school and our parents' subsequent reactions, they were furious. They scolded our parents, saying, "We will take care of her," and came to my rescue. My grandparents did not abandon me, even though I was in a state of despair. They faced me directly, and with their support, along with my sisters, I gradually started to recover. Although it was only my desire to end my life that had quieted down. I was unable to erase my fear and mistrust towards the opposite sex, no matter how hard I tried. However, my grandfather would always encourage me, saying, "There will be a time when you can be happy in any way without having to get married. We just want you to be happy in any way you want to live. So forget about the guy who said terrible things to you. It's a waste of time to keep remembering such a person. We may not have much time left, but you still have many futures ahead of you." My grandmother also always reassured me, saying that as long as I was happy, that was all that mattered. She would often compliment me, saying things like, "Your skin is so glowing, it makes me jealous," or "Your eyes are as beautiful as jewels." My sister would also visit our grandparents' house and spend time chatting with me. We'd read magazines together, discuss cute cosmetics, and generally enjoy our time. After living like this for about 3 years, I began to feel motivated to do something. I decided to start studying again to get my high school equivalency diploma, which I eventually acquired. Afterwards, I started looking for work I could do from home, and slowly started to earn income. The income was less than what others made working outside, but considering the days when I had shut myself in and was in a state of despair, I felt that I had grown quite a bit. However, I was still scared of comments about my appearance, so I couldn't go outside. This was how I was living at my grandparents' house, when my parents suddenly showed up one day. They hadn't even bothered to make a single phone call since I moved to my grandparents' house. But they stormed in, saying they had something to discuss with me. They announced, "There's a marriage proposal for you. The prospective groom is the son of a medical foundation representative. Apparently, he also has some issues and has a hard time finding a spouse. So the focus has now turned to you. But isn't this great? He's rich and he's willing to take someone like you who's been a burden on society." I was taken aback by this sudden turn of events, but my grandparents stepped in to help. They argued that it was unreasonable to make decisions without considering my feelings. My father, who seemed to speak convincingly, responded, "This might be the last chance for her. She's had so many painful experiences because of her appearance. Why not consider this as a chance for happiness?" The face of the man in the marriage document was mostly hidden by his bangs and wasn't clear, but I could make out his plump physique and the contours of his face. I understood instantly that he was probably also being forced into marriage to get rid of some problem. Or maybe he was an extreme eccentric who liked unusual things. But even if I rejected the proposal here, it seemed like the negotiations with the other family were already in progress. They seemed like a wealthy family, and my parents would undoubtedly try to force me into the marriage. If I ran away from this, it could potentially have negative repercussions on my grandparents. For the sake of my grandparents who have protected me from that day until now, I made up my mind. I understand. I will accept this proposal. Upon hearing these words, my grandparents' eyes widened. They embraced me and tried to persuade me numerous times. "You don't have to go along with such a ridiculous proposition." However, I told them through tears, "Grandma, Grandpa, until that day, I had lost all hope in life. But because you were by my side, I was able to enjoy living until now. I can't thank you enough, but I don't want to cause any more trouble, so I've decided to accept this marriage proposal. Maybe, like Dad said, this is my last chance." My grandparents cried soundlessly and hugged me tightly. And then a few days later, I had to meet with the man from the proposal and his parents. I hadn't expected that this meeting would change my fate at all. The prospective groom, a man named Matthew, was hunched over and always looking down. His face was mostly hidden by his hair, and his skin seemed to be rough in places. His voice was so quiet that I sometimes couldn't understand what he was saying. Matthew barely glanced at my face throughout our meeting and only answered questions in short, clipped sentences. I wondered, is this man going to be my husband? He can't even hold a basic conversation. However, I was in no position to complain. Both sets of parents seemed not only enthusiastic about the marriage, but acted as if it was already decided. I felt comfortable, but I didn't feel like I could say no. Eventually, the marriage arrangement was agreed upon. Sure enough, as the son of a wealthy family, a luxurious high-rise apartment was provided as our new home, furnished with high-end branded appliances and furniture. However, our conversations didn't flow well. It was almost like he couldn't see me. He was so silent. However, being constantly silent was also stressful, so I tried to find a conversation topic. "Why did you accept this marriage proposal, Matthew?" Upon asking this, he surprisingly began to take off his long-sleeved shirt. Confused by his sudden action and in a state of panic, I saw that his skin was red and appeared inflamed. He explained, "I suffer from a skin disease called psoriasis. It doesn't transfer from touch, so please don't worry. But because of its appearance, I've reached this point without any romantic experiences. There were even rumors that I had an STD, which is impossible. Moreover, my appearance is so unattractive that even my parents don't want to involve themselves with me. They probably brought up this marriage to get rid of me. I'm sorry for involving you in my circumstances." After explaining, he redressed and bowed deeply to me. I saw a glimpse of inflammation at his hairline, and I understood that he was growing his bangs long to hide it. "I see. Please, raise your head. I'm in a similar situation too." When Matthew raised his face, I told him everything about my past. When he heard my story about high school, he started crying. "I can't believe something like that happened to you. It must have been so hard at the time. It's unacceptable that a guy would do that to you, treating you like an exhibit. That's outrageous." He became angry to a stranger on my behalf and offered me words of comfort. Despite having experienced his share of hardships, he cried and became angry upon hearing my story. I wondered, how kind-hearted is this man? Seeing this, I commented, We seem quite similar, don't we? Matthew replied, blushing with a shy smile. I was thinking the same thing. After that, we spent the entire night sharing our life stories, crying, getting angry, and sympathizing with each other. From then on, we slowly started to understand each other. I tried to understand his disease and collected a variety of information, trying everything from dietary therapy to supplements. But, I noticed that he was surprisingly picky about food, especially vegetables. So I tried different seasonings and cooking methods and made various arrangements so that he could eat more easily. Then perhaps, finding the taste to his liking, he began to enjoy his meals, saying they were delicious. He began to improve his constitution, little by little, by taking in nutrients through meals and taking medication. Also, to reduce stress, we started doing things like yoga and having lots of conversations, and I saw Matthew's smile slowly increase. Matthew never made a nasty comment about my face, but rather, he repeatedly praised me, saying, "Cute," while blushing. Just once when I asked him, "Don't you dislike my face?" he told me, "Not at all. It's part of your character, and I think it's cute. And you've managed to stand up on your own despite going through tough times. I don't think there's another woman who's as strong and wonderful as you." His words gave me a profound sense of comfort. Over the following few years, we carried out a plan to improve Matthew's physical condition. As a result, his skin inflammation calmed down a bit, and the inflammation at his hairline became less noticeable. Moreover, thanks to his disciplined lifestyle, he lost weight and turned into a slim and smart-looking Matthew. I couldn't help but fall in love with him all over again. When he tidied up his obstructive bangs, it suited him very well. Matthew, who had been shy about his skin condition until now, said, "I can't show Sophia an unsightly figure." He became more confident, and the impression of the people at his office slowly changed for the better. Apparently, he hadn't told anyone about his disease, assuming they wouldn't understand. When he finally opened up about it, he was surprised that everyone accepted him. They even told him, "Why didn't you tell us? Trust us more." One day, while we were spending such days, Matthew suddenly said, "Hey, do you want to have a wedding ceremony?" Even though I had become a bit more positive since marrying him, I was still afraid of appearing in front of a large crowd. When I hesitated, he said, "If you really hate the idea, of course we don't have to. But I thought it would be a good way to express our gratitude to the people at my company who helped me. But the fact that I can even think like this is all thanks to you, Sophia. The old me would have thought that a wedding ceremony was impossible because I didn't want my dirty skin to be seen. But thanks to your cooperation, my symptoms have calmed down. So I think I can face forward more than before." His gentle words moved me, and after a lot of soul-searching, I decided that I wanted to take a step forward and agreed to have a wedding ceremony. But I don't have any friends, so the only ones I invited were my parents, grandparents, and my sister. However, when it was less than 4 months until the wedding, my sister was found to be pregnant. To be safe, my sister decided to absent herself, so in the end, only my parents and grandparents attended. My grandparents were happy to participate, but my parents clearly disliked the idea. However, they couldn't refuse due to their status, so they participated reluctantly. The same was true for Matthew's parents. They didn't seem happy at all, but because some of their foundation's associates and people they knew were attending, they reluctantly agreed to come. But both sets of parents were good at maintaining appearances, so in front of the other guests, they said things they didn't really think, such as, "We struggled with his illness, but we're glad that he has grown up so well," or, "We're proud of our child, who has lived strongly without being defeated by prejudice," all the while pretending to be moved to tears. The guests, fooled by our parents' false tears and words, even shed a few sympathetic tears, which only added to my astonishment at their audacity in wanting to be seen in a good light despite everything. But Matthew was not one to silently endure our parents' deceit. When it was time for the groom's letter to be read aloud, he chose that moment to speak about his past. He spoke about how he had endured a difficult time as a student because of prejudice and discrimination due to his skin disease. Despite his condition not being contagious, no one would touch anything he had touched. But meeting and marrying me had given him a more positive outlook. He also said, "Both my wife and I have received terrible treatment from our own parents, My wife was constantly compared to her older sister and was verbally abused her whole life. When she stopped going to school due to cruel comments from her classmates about her facial disease in high school, her parents never took her seriously and even said she should apologize to anyone who had to confess to her because of her face. This hurt her so deeply that she could hardly go outside. I too was frequently berated by my parents about my skin, being called dirty over and over again. Here is the proof. With that, he played a recording of his parents berating him for his skin condition. The voice recording included terrible comments like, "Your skin makes us uncomfortable to look at," and "We should have never had a child with such dirty skin." His parents tried to stop the recording, but it was too late. The cold stares of the listeners pierced them, and they were dumbstruck. My parents also seemed extremely uncomfortable as whispers circulated around them. Despite the awkward conclusion to our wedding ceremony, many of the invited guests expressed their understanding towards us, with comments like, "You've worked hard until now," and "We'll keep supporting you." However, this public revelation later became a big issue. It turned out that Matthew's parents headed a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting disabled individuals, based on the principle of creating a society where people with disabilities can live easily. The revelation that they had been cruel to their own child who suffered from a skin disease became a problem. Eventually, the criticism and opposition from those around them didn't stop, and they were forced to step down from their leadership positions in the organization. As for my parents, it was revealed that they had accepted a substantial dowry to marry me off to Matthew, and they started being referred to as beasts who sold their own child for money by those around them. However, they squandered that dowry for their own selfish desires, and with no knowledge whatsoever, decided to dabble in stocks, leading to a huge loss. Eventually, they ended up in debt due to the tune of over $200,000, far exceeding the amount of the dowry they received. They had the audacity to ask for our help, but we firmly refused. Even when they came knocking a few more times, we moved away and changed our phone numbers. Now, we're living peacefully together. I guess there really is such a thing as a destined meeting. I am incredibly happy right now. Though the start was rocky, meeting Matthew and marrying him has made me feel truly blessed. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope to see you again in the next video.
My mother-in-law casually broke the news to my stunned self. "We're going to be living together now. We just remodeled it into a duplex for convenience. The property is in your name, right, Emma? Sorry to bother you, but could you please cover the $80,000 remodeling bill?" My mother-in-law and husband laughed triumphantly. Witnessing this, I, filled with resolve, was about to confront them with the truth that even my husband didn't know, along with the evidence. I am Emma Davis, 26 years old. I live a bit away from the downtown, in a nature-rich area, and work an office job while drawing illustrations as a hobby. Lately, I enjoy uploading my drawings on social media and reading the comments on them daily. I have a husband who is 3 years older than me, and we're enjoying our married life in a favorite old farmhouse that we bought right after our wedding. But there has been a visitor to this house once a month since we got married, who always gives me a headache. "Emma! Emma! I'm here! Please open up quickly!" Hearing the persistent banging on the sliding front door, I rushed to it. "Ah, mother-in-law, I'll open it right away." Even though there's a perfectly good doorbell right next to the door, I try to make a smile and open the sliding door. "There are so many bugs around here. It's so annoying. Is George still at work? Poor thing, even on Saturday. Oh, I brought some of his favorite food." I see a woman holding a large bag, looking tired from waiting beyond the door. While dealing with her rapid-fire chatter, I paste on a fake smile. The once-a-month visitor is my husband's mother, that is, my mother-in-law. My husband being an only child, she insists on taking care of him even after our marriage, and to my gratitude, she even instructs me on house chores. The last time she came to our house, She rearranged all the food in the fridge, and I had to start the next day's breakfast preparation from hunting down the ingredients. I recall my husband repeatedly telling me before we got married, "If my parents ever need care, we'll live together. I want you to understand that." I'm disappointed to think I might have to give up this beloved old house when the time comes, but I've come to accept it. What bothers me more is the thought of living with this mother-in-law 24/7. Sorry for my husband. It fills me with a bit of gloom. Fast forward 2 years into our farmhouse married life. I heard my husband that my father-in-law had slipped on the stairs at home and broke his leg. "They will need our help from now on. Let's live together, just as we discussed before our marriage." Yes, I'm worried too, so I think it's a good idea. Can I continue my drawing hobby? I was worried about my father-in-law's health, so I agreed without hesitation to move in together. However, I was anxious that being caught up in housework and taking care of my in-laws might rob me of the time for my hobby of drawing. Whether he was aware of my anxiety or not, my husband just said, "I want you to prioritize the house," and left the room, headed to his office. Being left alone in my room, I felt like I had half given up on my selfish husband. While looking back at the illustrations I had drawn up until now, one by one, I began to sort out my feelings. Just as I had made up my mind to live with them, an unexpected event occurred. While I was working as usual at my workplace, I suddenly felt numbness in my hands and feet and was instantly overwhelmed by intense dizziness and collapsed. Thanks to a colleague who immediately called an ambulance, my life was not in danger, but it turned out to be a stroke at a young age after medical examination. Although I had been pointed out high blood pressure in health checks before, I regretted neglecting it without going to the hospital. Including detailed examination, surgery, and rehabilitation, the hospitalization period turned out to be about 2 months. From the discovery of the disease to the hospitalization progressed at a brisk pace, and she realizes that her husband has given her very little concern. After being diagnosed with a stroke at a young age, I took out my phone with trembling hands and called my husband right away. The only thing I could hear from the phone was a disappointing voice saying, "I see, so the living together will be postponed, huh?" I couldn't respond to the fact that he was worried about the future life at my in-laws' house, not about my body. Since my father-in-law is still in the hospital with a fracture, there was no need to worry about caregiving, which was a blessing in disguise that I could focus on treatment. Also, since we don't have children, there's no need to worry about that. Suddenly, the face of my mother-in-law, who always says, "I want to see my grandchild's face soon," every time we meet, pops up, and as if to shake it off, I picked up the sketchbook nearby. Recently, I've been too busy preparing to live with my in-laws and going through examinations since I collapsed to have time for my favorite illustrations. Once I start living with my in-laws, I'll probably lose even more time to draw. I decided to think of this hospitalization period as the last free time that God has given me, and decided to fully enjoy my hobby. When this period is over, I decided in my heart to do my best for my husband and in-laws, whether it's housework or anything else. The 2-month hospital stay ended in a flash, and finally, the day of discharge. My husband casually asked if he should come to pick me up, but I wanted to spend some time alone until I got home, so I declined, feeling a bit guilty. While I was in the bus, I saw the familiar landscape outside the window and realized that I was already near home. The sunlight hitting the beautiful green leaves was dazzlingly sparkling, making me feel indescribable as I thought, this is goodbye to this rich, natural place. Since my in-laws' house is located relatively close to the city center, my life will change drastically from now on. Feeling a little lonely, I slowly got off the bus at the familiar bus stop. As I was heading towards my soon-to-be farewell home, I suddenly stopped in my tracks at the sight that appeared before me. There was supposed to be my favorite old private house here, but instead, there was a house I had never seen before. Since I had been in the hospital for about 2 months, I checked the position of the surrounding buildings and the way I came, wondering if I had mistaken the location. But it was not a mistake after all. There's no use wandering around, so I timidly pressed the intercom of the house. Then a familiar voice said, "Yes." The voice was undoubtedly my husband. Still feeling confused, I quietly answered, "It's Michelle," to the intercom. The front door creaked open, and my husband in his casual attire came out. "Aha, welcome home. You came home earlier than I expected. I had the day off today. I could have picked you up." "George, what happened to our house? Why has it changed so much?" I interrupted my husband, who seemed relaxed, maybe just woke up, his hair mist, to ask my question with a sense of disbelief. However, disregarding my anxiousness, George only responded with a vague, "Huh? What's up? What happened?" without intending to answer my question. Just then, I heard laughter coming from inside the house. Thinking it couldn't be, I pushed past my husband and headed toward the living room. When I opened the unfamiliar door leading to the living room, I saw my mother-in-law lying on the couch watching TV. She was clutching her stomach and laughing while watching the TV screen. "Why is my mother-in-law in this house?" "Oh, Michelle, welcome back. Hospital stays can be long, but don't worry. I took care of the house while you were gone." I wonder what this house stuff my mother-in-law is talking about. Could it be chores? Or, with an overwhelming bad feeling, I pressed my mother-in-law on why the old house had changed so much. Without showing any sign of guilt, she blurted out, "Well, we're all going to live together, right? So I just remodeled it into a duplex to make it more comfortable." The phrase, "just remodeled it into a duplex," kept replaying in my mind. My mother-in-law was always the type to interfere with our life, but I never expected her to remodel our house without permission. Moreover, weren't we supposed to start living together in my in-laws' house, which is closer to the city center? Every time my mother-in-law visited the old house here, she used to complain about the bugs and the short walk from the station. Despite that, why? "A lot of things have changed. Oh, and there's something else important I have to tell you." Turning off the TV she had been watching, my mother-in-law whispered to me with a grin, "The remodeling cost a bit. I believe the title to this house is under your name, Michelle. I'm sorry, but could you handle the payment?" Chuckles, not a hint of apology in them, my mother-in-law said, "It's $80,000. And her smile deepened. "Remodeling cost? The title to this house? $80,000? The unexpected words felt like a punch to the head, and I felt my legs are shaking. I can't even find the words to reply, while I was staring at her mother-in-law, who was stunned and laughing fearlessly. My husband, who was at the entrance, opened the living room door and sneaked in. The moment I saw him, my feet naturally headed towards him, holding a faint hope that he would surely be on my side. I relayed to my husband exactly what my mother-in-law had said, clinging to a desperate hope for his reaction. But all I received from him was a cold response. "Well, that's about right. Take care of it, will you?" That's right. That's the kind of man he is. When I collapsed from a stroke, he was more concerned about our living arrangements than my health. He's a man who will stop if his mother says green means stop, and will go if she says red means go. A man who always thinks his mother is right. The discomfort and dissatisfaction I'd felt toward my husband escalate once it flooded. I was done. I thought from the bottom of my heart, I would throw this family. "I understand now, George. I am going to divorce you. And mother-in-law? No, Cecilia. Please handle the renovation costs on your own." After declaring this all at once, I turned my back on them and moved to leave the room as quickly as possible. But it seemed they weren't going to let me go so easily. "I've been losing interest in you anyway, so it's no big deal. But remember, this house is in your name, Emma, so you have a responsibility to pay." "That's right. Feel free to leave, but please settle your dues first." I was astonished at the two of them who selfishly made their claims. I cannot help but let out a sigh. Surely, if I turned around, I'd see their smug faces grinning in victory. I refused to look back, standing tall as I replied, You keep saying the house is in my name, George, but did you forget? The ownership has been transferred to you. I revealed the truth. However, they only laughed at me and believed I was lying, just to avoid paying. That's when I brought up how George had asked me to change the property's ownership when we got married, as he didn't want the house to be in his wife's name for appearance's sake. Since I didn't particularly care about the property title, I had immediately transferred it to his name. Upon hearing this, the laughter of the two who had been so complacent until now abruptly stopped, and I could feel the panic gradually setting in. I don't recall saying such a thing. There's no proof anyway. Anticipating this response, I turned back to face them, walked past them, and opened a drawer of a shelf from our old house. Let's see. It should be somewhere around... here it is. This is the proof. I took out a document from the drawer where the property and the house ownership were listed and showed it in front of their faces. When I carefully pointed to the part that said the ownership was in George's name, my husband's face turned pale. That's fraud. I never thought you'd actually do it, and I definitely can't pay such a huge sum of $80,000. I was disgusted with my husband, who started yelling as soon as he realized the payment obligation was on him. Since a decent conversation seems impossible, let's communicate through lawyers from now on. Cecilia, your son seems to be in quite a pickle, so please take good care of him from now on. Beside my loud husband, I smiled at my mother-in-law, who was standing dazedly, and finally turned my back on them, leaving their home for good. After that, my husband called several times, but I chose to ignore him entirely, decide to communicate formally through a lawyer. Given our already strained relationship and problems with my mother-in-law, the divorce was settled without any issues. In addition, regarding the matter that my husband insistently shouted when he left, change of name is a fraud, was decided that there was an agreement between us because it was changed when they got married 2 years ago. My lawyer assured me with a smile that this is neither fraud nor anything illegal. With that, all the uncertainty inside me was completely dispelled. It seemed that the cost of renovating that house was supposed to be paid in full by me as soon as I got discharged from the hospital. Wanting to applaud, I now appreciate the well-crafted, spiteful act of pushing me into hell just after I had endured surgery and rehabilitation and finally got discharged due to illness. In the end, since the house was in my husband's name, it was his duty to make the lump sum payment, and he ended up strangling himself. In addition, I was able to secure alimony after the successful divorce. My husband, who had been hit with a claim for a total amount that he could not possibly pay off, had either borrowed money from dangerous places or hadn't. While I was fighting with my husband and mother-in-law, I received an apology from my father-in-law, Bob, who had been hospitalized with a broken leg, saying, "I'm sorry for my wife and son's behavior." Of course, it didn't seem that Bob was involved in this matter. However, there's no denying that for 2 years after our marriage, he had ignored his wife and my cold husband. After replying briefly to Bob's message, I decided to cut all ties with that family and start a new life. Since then, my health has gradually improved, and I was able to return to work. When I was married, I used to draw illustrations while being mindful of my husband's gaze, but now I can immerse myself in it as much as I want, whenever I want. Originally, I was just drawing as a hobby, but now I get job offers from the social networking site where I post my illustrations, and I now spend more time drawing for work than for pleasure. Now I'm heading to see an old farmhouse in a somewhat rural town. My current dream is to buy this old farmhouse with the alimony from my husband and my savings, and to open an art studio. Today, I'm about to take the first step towards this dream. On the bus, as I gazed out at the scenery, I found myself recalling that day. The day I left the hospital changed my life forever. The abundant, natural scenery outside is the same as that day, but my feelings are clear, and I'm excited about the new life that's about to begin. The leaves on the trees, illuminated by the sunlight, look so bright that they dazzled.
I don't plan on relying on someone who hasn't even gotten married past 30. Acting all high and mighty with that chump change, I couldn't help but be shocked by the first words directed at me from the woman who was supposed to become my sister-in-law. My brother, with an even more malicious grin, turned to me. "Sis, just go home already. Please don't forget to leave your gift, though." The two of them laughed at me together. I felt something close to hatred towards my brother, but the next words he said made me lose even that emotion. "Well, it doesn't really matter if we have your gift or not. All our relatives love me, and they're probably giving us a lot of money. Mom likes me more than you too, so she might even give me all of her property." "Hey, that makes it sound like you're just using them for money." "Well, it can't be helped. They're a good source of income." I never thought my brother could be such a terrible person. I was foolish for being considerate of these people. Despite it being our first reunion in a long time, my brother hasn't changed a bit since the old days. If anything, his terrible personality has only worsened, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I reached my limit and left the waiting room while the two of them laughed together. My name is Emma. I'm 32 years old. I work for a foreign cosmetics company. After graduating from college, I worked for another company, but I was lucky enough to be headhunted by my current company and changed jobs. The people I work with are ambitious, and I work tirelessly every day while receiving constant motivation. As a result, I now hold the position of department head. Ever since I started working at this company, they have recognized my worth. Every day has been enjoyable. Of course, there are times when I struggle with work, but the sense of accomplishment after overcoming those challenges is something I can't experience anywhere else. I've never been one to spend my days thinking about how much fun I'm having every day, especially before going to college. My days were very stifling. I have a younger brother, Nate, who is 5 years younger than me. Ever since Nate was born, my mom has been completely devoted to him. She loves him so much that I became less important to her. As a young child, I couldn't find anything to fill the loneliness of not being cared for by my mom. The more my dad and relatives tried to pay attention to me, the more I missed my mom. On the other hand, Nate was the first boy born in our family in a long time. He was also the type to easily get spoiled by anyone. So before long, our relatives stopped caring about me and only doted on my brother. To make matters worse, I have a strong sense of justice and hate wrongdoing. Not many people find a child who points out problems so cutely. Because of this, I became more and more distant from my relatives. The worst part was Nate's personality. Having been pampered by my mom and relatives, Nate grew into someone who couldn't be satisfied unless he was the center of attention, and knew exactly how to behave to get it. You could say he was skillful and good at getting by in life, but you could also say he was manipulative. I couldn't get along well with such a brother. Nate often got into fights, and my mom always defended him. I started to lose my sense of purpose. Not just my mom, but my relatives also started favoring Nate, and I began to feel uncomfortable whenever our family gathered. Seeing me like this, Nate would say, "Why don't you go to the other room, sis?" He had a smiling face, but he was giving me a look that didn't allow any objections. At that time, Nate was in the first grade of elementary school. If something bothered him, he wouldn't hesitate to lie and make me look like the bad guy. I had long lost my position as the older sister. When my brother said that, I had no choice but to leave. But what hurt more than being treated like an intruder by my brother was the way my mother and relatives acted. When my father noticed I was gone and asked, "Where's Emma?" the relatives just shook their heads, and my mother said, "I don't know." Then Nate jumped in. "Speaking of which, the other day," my mother and the relatives listened with great interest to his story, as if I never existed. It was so heartbreaking. Nothing changed, even when I wasn't around. At times like that, only my father's sister, Aunt Ava, worried about me. "Here you are. Don't you want to go back to the others? Or do you not want to?" As I cried quietly, sad and frustrated, my aunt sat down next to me without me noticing. She gently stroked my back as I buried my face in her lap. When I couldn't say anything, my aunt began to speak softly. I kind of understand how you feel, Emma. Maybe it's because I'm an older sister, too. Ever since my brother was born, he was the one who got all the attention. And you know how our relatives are, mostly women, right? So they really spoil the boys. I always thought it was unfair. You too, Aunt Ava? I was surprised. My aunt was always cheerful and in charge at family gatherings, and I never would have thought she felt that way. My aunt smiled gently in response to my question. Yes, when I was a kid, I was so jealous of my brother all the time. But he wasn't very talkative, so he wasn't always the center of attention like Nate. I think you must be feeling much worse than I did. Aunt Ava said this while gently stroking my head. I hadn't had my head patted like this in so long, and I felt a mix of emotions, happiness and embarrassment for letting her see how weak I felt. Our family has strong ties, you know. And Nate is kind of cunning, or maybe he's just good at winning people's hearts. He has that kind of personality, right? Everyone gets easily fooled by him. Really, Aunt Ava? You think that about Nate too? I was surprised again, thinking that no one in the family saw my brother that way. Aunt Ava winked at me, surprised. So don't forget, I'm watching you, Emma. If you want, I can talk to everyone about it. No, it's okay. Just knowing that you're watching me is enough to make me happy. All right, I understand. But if there's anything you want me to hear, I'll listen. You can always rely on me. After that, I looked forward to seeing my aunt at family gatherings. Even now that I've moved away, I still keep in touch with her regularly. The only other contact I have is the occasional email from my father with updates. Since I rarely go home, I don't know much about my family and relatives' current situation, so I never expected to get this kind of news from my father. Nate is getting married. Right now, I don't have a partner. One by one, my friends are getting married, and lately, even my coworkers are in a marriage rush. At a time when I was feeling a bit anxious, I got the unexpected news of my younger brother's wedding. Even though I'm not unhappy with my current life, I felt down. Then Nate contacted me, adding insult to injury. Hey sis, long time no see. I'm getting married, and my fiancée is already pregnant. Don't worry about not being married and showing our parents your grandchild. I've got that covered. But in return, give us at least $10,000 as a gift. It includes the cost of giving birth. Kids are expensive, you know. My already low excitement to celebrate Nate's wedding dropped to 0. Because of his sense of entitlement, I even considered not attending the wedding. But I convinced myself that this was a once-in-a-lifetime family event and decided to accept Nate's request. On the wedding day, after the ceremony, we were led to a family waiting room to prepare for the reception. I reunited with my mom and relatives after a long time had passed without seeing them. Of course, the topic was all about Nate. I tried to accept it since he was the star of the day, but my past memories kept coming back. That day, the gloomy, cloudy sky seemed like it would rain any moment, and my mood got darker and darker. That's when my dad talked to me. Emma, it's been a while. How's work? Oh, Dad, I'm getting by somehow. I see. So would you consider coming back home more often? My dad said that, but I didn't feel like it. Yeah, I'll come back when work calms down. I need to go to the restroom now. I left the family waiting room. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I thought I had changed a bit, but I see others don't change so easily. As expected, I felt uncomfortable in front of my relatives. I let out a big sigh. At that moment, my phone vibrated. Come to the bride and groom's waiting room right now. It was a message from Nate. What does he want at a time like this? I headed to the bride and groom's waiting room, pondering. Did you bring it? As soon as I arrived, Nate asked me this question. I didn't understand at first, but I realized what he meant from his and his wife's nasty looks. Yeah, I brought the $10,000 gift. Are you satisfied now? Congratulations on your wedding. I reluctantly offered my congratulations, even though my heart wasn't in it. But I immediately regretted being considerate.
Only $10,000? I clearly said to give more than that. Isn't it common courtesy to give more than the requested amount? You're as clueless as ever, sis.
Wait a minute. Isn't $10,000 already a generous amount? I gave it because you said the baby was coming. Isn't your attitude a bit much? If you choose to act like this, I don't want to be involved with you in the future. As I snapped back, Nate exaggeratedly clicked his tongue. I was really annoyed that despite giving them the $10,000 they asked for, they still complained. As I glared at my brother, his wife standing next to him put her hand on her hip and laughed at me. Don't worry, we don't plan on relying on someone who's still unmarried in her 30s and acting so high and mighty for such a small amount of money. I couldn't help but be shocked by the first words directed at me by the woman who was supposed to be my sister-in-law. Nate also gave me a malicious grin.
Yeah, just take your gift and leave.
Make sure you leave the gift money. The two of them laughed at me together. I felt a strong hatred for my brother and his wife, but Nate's next words made me lose that feeling.
Well, even without your gift, we'll be fine. All our relatives love me. I'm sure they gave us a lot of money. Mom likes me more than you, too. She might even give me her entire fortune.
Wait, that makes it sound like you're just using them for money.
Well, it's true. That's why we invited fewer friends and more relatives.
I never thought my brother could be such a terrible person. I couldn't help but be shocked by Nate and his wife, who seemed to find it amusing that he viewed our relatives and even our mother like that. I was stupid for worrying about them. I was disgusted by my brother, who hadn't changed at all since we were kids and had only gotten worse. Unable to bear it any longer, I left the bride and groom's waiting room as they continued to laugh. Emma! As soon as I left the waiting room, I heard someone call my name. It was my Aunt Ava. Seeing my aunt, I couldn't help but let my feelings show. Auntie, I can't take it anymore. I'm leaving. When I said that, my aunt showed her anger. I heard what just happened. This is unforgivable. Everyone should know about it. But it's true that everyone likes Nate, right? If I say something, I'm sure no one will believe me. It's not like he's forcing our relatives to give them money, so it's just a matter of me putting up with it. It's fine. I don't think I'll ever see them again anyway. Apparently, my aunt had been worried about me looking uncomfortable in the relatives' waiting room and followed me when I left. After she had heard my conversation with Nate and his wife, my aunt suggested telling everyone. But after seeing the two of them laughing and looking down on our entire family and relatives, I had already given up. However, my aunt was filled with anger, contrary to how I felt. You don't have to put up with it anymore, Emma. I never thought Nate would go this far. There's still time. Let's confront them together and reveal everything. If anyone still supports Nate after that, then they can be their source of money or whatever else they want. Encouraged by my aunt's words, I decided to face the situation and returned to the family room with her. Surprisingly, my mother's brother, Uncle John, believed my story right away.
Actually, there have been some bad rumors about him at the company. I didn't want to doubt my nephew, and I thought it was natural for the business to have some bad times. But after hearing Emma's story, it all makes sense. I guess I was only considered valuable as long as I was paying him.
Uncle John runs a company, and Nate works there. It seems Nate has been taking advantage of his position as the president's nephew and doing whatever he pleases. Because Uncle John is the company's president, our relatives respect him. When he acknowledged my story, everyone started to believe me one by one. There's no way Nate could be like that. My mother, who had been adamant until the end, gradually grew suspicious, not only because of me, but also because my aunt had talked about Nate. My mother, who had been asked for hundreds of thousands of dollars for wedding and childbirth expenses, seemed to have her doubts and eventually accepted our story. My father, who seemed to have believed me from the beginning, was radiating with anger. At that moment, when all the relatives finally listened to me and my aunt, my father spoke up.
I'm sorry for our son. We must have raised him wrong. Let's all go home today. He doesn't deserve to be celebrated.
With those words from my father, my mother and all the relatives decided not to attend the wedding reception. My parents hurriedly left the family room to explain the situation to the other guests. As we waited at the shuttle bus stop, the people who were supposed to attend the wedding started to arrive. At the end of the crowd, I could see my parents. My father gave me a strong nod when he saw me. I'm sure all the guests had decided not to attend. Thank you for believing in me. I tried to convey that to my father. But as I approached him, he was yelling into his cell phone.
Who would celebrate someone like you, who repays kindness with malice?
The person on the phone must be Nate. It was the first time I had seen my father so openly angry.
I heard from Aunt Ava, Nate. It seems you've been calling our family and relatives a bunch of gold diggers. How could you say that after all they've done for you? We have no intention of celebrating you anymore. We're going home today.
My father hung up the phone and apologized to me for all the hard times I had gone through. As soon as we got on the bus, Nate called me.
Emma and Aunt Ava turned everyone against us and spread rumors. Now nobody's left at the venue.
I calmly responded to Nate, who was panicking and raising his voice. Your Aunt Ava heard you guys making fun of the family. She joined in the conversation, so everyone believed us. Can you stop saying I spread rumors? I just told the truth. It's the same thing. What are you going to do about it? And I don't know. We're already on the bus.
Don't say that. Are all of them on the bus too? If so, please convince them to come back with you.
At first, Nate was confident, but now his voice sounds like he's about to cry, realizing the situation is bad. But I didn't feel like forgiving him at all. You just want the gift money, don't you?
That's not my intention.
Either way, we're not coming back, so goodbye. I'll cut ties with you after this.
Wait, sis.
I heard my brother's desperate voice from the phone, but I hung up without caring. After that, cell phones started ringing, one after another on the bus. It must have been my brother and his wife calling, but no one answered the calls from someone who saw their family and relatives as cash cows. In the end, my brother and his wife couldn't get any gift money from the attendees, not just me, our parents and relatives. They seemed to have planned to pay for the wedding with the gift money and ended up in a lot of debt. Not only me, but our parents and relatives were contacted for help, but no one was willing to help Nate anymore. On top of that, they lost contact with the few friends they had invited. The punishment for my brother was far from over. Our uncle fired Nate. He probably couldn't bring himself to defend my brother, who had been performing poorly and had a bad reputation. His wife had already quit her job for marriage, and even though they were in debt, I'm pregnant. She didn't seem to want to work. In the end, they had no money, constant fights, and decided to divorce before the baby was born. After giving birth, his wife tried to make money working at night, but her bad personality held her back, and she could barely pay off the debt. My brother couldn't find another job and got stuck in a cycle of borrowing more money to pay off his debts. He seemed to have come back home for help several times, but both our father and mother rejected him. On the other hand, I've been going back to my parents' house more often since Nate's wedding. I've been attending family gatherings, and I don't feel uncomfortable anymore. As a result, I feel like I have more room in my heart and can see things from a much broader perspective. I've become more flexible in dealing with work accidents and requests, and my colleagues, subordinates, and bosses have praised the change in atmosphere. And just the other day, I was invited to dinner by a salesperson from a company we've been dealing with for a while. I feel a little excited about the long-awaited signs of spring.
Only earning $750 a month is like college student allowance. Don't even students working at bars make more? Having a low-income wife is a disgrace. Maybe you should divorce so our son can find a better wife. After all, he's the ultimate triple threat. My mother-in-law keeps making snide comments after seeing a pay stub. But it's not actually my pay stub. My name is Amanda. I'm a 32-year-old nurse. I've been married to John for 5 years. We met at a college club, started dating, and got married. We met at a party when he was a medical student and I was a nursing student. John hasn't passed the medical licensing exam after failing twice and taking 3 years off. He's currently working part-time and studying hard for the exam. I'm working as a full-time nurse, so I'm the primary breadwinner. He's not the type to brag about making money in cosmetic surgery and posting pictures of a $468,020 Rolls-Royce on social media. He's serious, reading accounts of people who've lost family members to illness, checking the number of people affected by infectious diseases daily, and reading literature on Japan's healthcare system. I respected him even though he wasn't a doctor yet. He genuinely wanted to become a doctor who saves his patients, so I didn't abandon him, despite his lack of income and entering his 30s. He kept the fact that he wasn't a doctor yet a secret from his parents. Sorry, my mom is too nosy. It's fine. I support you, so you don't have to worry about your parents. Live your life the way you want. This is short term. That's why it remained a secret. The reason it wasn't discovered was that he worked at night as a security guard at the hospital where I worked, so he was technically employed there. He had knowledge and could obtain information from my stories on the job. No one suspected he wasn't a doctor yet because he could talk like one. So to his seldom-seen in-laws, I said, "Yes, patients really like him." I believe that while cruel lies hurt people, kind lies sometimes save them. Telling a patient, "You have 3 months left and there's no chance of recovery, it's a countdown," is worse than saying, "You look good today and you ate a lot." That's how people are. On the other hand, my mother-in-law, who is the complete opposite of my serious and honest husband, has a very harsh personality. She's the typical overbearing mother-in-law. She looks down on me for being a mere nurse, married to her son, the doctor. There must have been so many better options, like a beautiful doctor in dermatology. I always apologize and bow my head when she talks like that. I wholeheartedly support him in his pursuit of becoming a doctor, but at this point, he's just a high school graduate with extensive medical knowledge working part-time. He's not even a medical intern. But my husband is genuinely grateful to me, saying, "Thank you for everything, always." So I silently supported him. In fact, I'm also very busy with work. Our combined income was barely enough to make ends meet, but it couldn't be helped. I didn't care much about money as I entered this world because I genuinely admired Florence Nightingale. Currently, I'm a nurse in internal medicine, the most demanding field in terms of workload. The thought of wanting money hasn't even crossed my mind. As long as we can live, eat, and stay healthy, that's enough. Isn't that ultimately what life's about? Despite the fact that I'm supporting my husband's living expenses and tuition, my mother-in-law goes around the neighborhood saying, "My son is a doctor and earns well." In the first place, if he were a serious doctor, he wouldn't want his mother to brag about his income, good or bad. But my mother-in-law doesn't care and only talks about money, money, money. As her son, he has no choice but to silently endure it. She is completely unaware that he is actually working as a security guard in uniform at the hospital instead of walking briskly in a white coat like she brags about. Even if he were walking briskly in a white coat, it's not something to brag about and gossip. I understand the feeling, but it should be restrained. I was worried that my husband's mental state might be affected and he might fail the medical licensing exam because he's barely hanging on to becoming a doctor. If he ends up spending his entire life as a security guard after sticking it out for this long, it would be a shame. Moreover, to put it mildly, his personality is well suited for a doctor. His only weakness seems to be his kindness. That's why my mother-in-law speculates and says things like, "My son makes $373,000 a year." For him, knowing that's false only adds more pressure. I once gently voiced my disapproval about it. I think it would be better for the patients if you didn't talk so much about his job because it might cause problems. After all, if you think about it from the opposite perspective, would you want to go to a doctor whose mother is constantly boasting about her son when you're sick? But my mother-in-law doesn't care. "Shut up. You're just a nurse. You should be grateful that you could marry a doctor. It's luckier than winning a $3 million lottery. Money can't buy status, you nursing school graduate." She spews such verbal abuse. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for allowing me to marry John. I respect him both as a doctor and as a person, so please, just leave him alone. You're so annoying. We can still make him divorce you and remarry now. It would be pitiful if our future grandchild inherits your low IQ blood. This is beyond harassment. It's close to a violation of human rights. But I kept quiet. Somehow, compared to saving a patient's life or a sense of mission in my work, my mother-in-law's sarcasm seemed very trivial. I didn't really take her seriously. But as those days continued, that day finally came. In fact, my in-laws' house is a 30-minute express train ride from our house, so we don't visit each other much. And I'm busy with work, so I wasn't around them much, which is why this lie has been working. However, I don't know if she was bored or just lost her patience, but my mother-in-law showed up at our house unannounced. What a cramped house. Why does my pride and joy of a son have to live in such a poor-looking house? Mother-in-law. Looking at the row of medical books, she narrowed her eyes and said, "Well, he is my son after all," and took a picture with her phone, but most of the books were for the national medical exam, so I was secretly nervous. Since this year's books were there, it would normally give away that he's still a student. My vital signs were in danger of betraying me, but I did my best to deceive her. "Mother-in-law, I'm sorry. We're both quite busy with work, so we haven't had time to find a bigger place, especially lately." I casually urged her to go home. But then she began going through my home of all things. "Hey, what's with these weird dishes? If you're a doctor, you should buy Wedgwood." "Yes, I'm sorry. They're from the dollar store." "What did you say? Dollar store? I'm throwing them away." "No, we couldn't afford luxuries because we were spending money on my husband's textbooks and tuition, so we cut costs on things like plates that didn't affect our simple meals. As long as we can serve food on them, it's fine. For now, passing the exam is the most important thing. My husband was, by chance, working as a security guard at the hospital at the time. It was a good thing he wasn't home. I didn't want to see him hurt, so I planned to get my mother-in-law to leave while he was at work. But she didn't stop rifling through our things. "I'm going to throw away these clothes that look like a student's. If you're a doctor, you should buy high-end branded clothes." My husband's favorite clothes were thrown away. And then, "What is this, a piece of junk watch? If you're a doctor, buy a luxury watch." She threw it away, seemingly unaware of the convenience of a smartwatch. The belongings of his that were being thrown away one after another were bought with that little money he had earned, and he would have preferred to be in a ward treating patients instead of standing outside, his pride in tatters. Still, he was working hard for the sake of his dreams and for the sweat he had shed. But there was no stopping her now. It's because he married a poor girl that you have a poor life, even though he's a doctor. It's a wonder you don't live in a tower mansion. Unbelievable. I was thinking of going shopping together and at least getting you to buy me a bag or something. Her statement was ultimately despicable. I had no choice but to point out that what my mother-in-law was expecting from my husband, student or not, was fundamentally different than how we really lived. I was a fellow medical professional. Gold digging for a doctor was out of the question. Mother-in-law, I don't mean to be forward, but he's not that extravagant. Our current lifestyle suits us well. I conveyed this casually, but my mother-in-law wouldn't budge. You're so annoying. Do you have any idea how hard he worked to get into medical school? We've been waiting to recoup his upbringing and tuition fees, and it's because of you that we're in this mess. Don't be ridiculous. My mother-in-law, increasingly heated, didn't stop searching my house. She rummaged through not just the kitchen but also every closet, discarding anything cheap. And then, unbelievably, she began to open the clear cases where we kept our utility bills, mail, and other paperwork. That's when she found the pay stubs. They were marked with $750 and $2.25. Despite my husband's name being clearly written on them, she either didn't notice or couldn't read the writing. And she screamed, $750? What do you mean, $750, you nurse? That's not my son's daily wage. Even anesthesiologists make $750 a day, and you're the wife of an internist, making only $750? Are you slacking off at work or what? She began to go insane. That's why you're living in such poverty. You're a money sucker, huh? Barely working as a nurse and deceiving a doctor? You're just a part-time nurse because it sounds good. $750 is nothing, so quit already. That money was earned by him, enduring the younger doctors passing him by without even a glance, biting his lip and working in the gaps between his study hours for a very low daily wage. It was by no means the same with or without it. I thought it was a very pure number. But my mother-in-law's madness wouldn't stop, and finally, the worst happened. You're a poor luck-bringing wife. Divorce quickly! At that moment, I heard the front door slam shut. My husband had returned home from his part-time job. His face froze when he saw his clothes and watch, which had been cruelly stuffed into a trash bag. He began to silently and carefully pick them up one by one. But my mother-in-law said this. John, I don't mean to be harsh, but please, divorce this wife of yours. Why did you, with your high education, high income, and tall height of nearly 6 feet, choose such a pathetic woman? I'm so sad, and she only earns $750. But my husband remained silent. I couldn't tell what he was thinking with his tightly pursed lips. My mother-in-law laughed and added, I'll bring the divorce papers for you. Leave this dusty room and this disinfectant-smelling woman behind and remarry a better woman. You're a doctor. Remarrying is a given. Oh. Then my husband slowly stood up and finally said, Mom, I've been keeping quiet about this, but I'm not a doctor yet. Huh? I'm sorry for hiding it, but I haven't passed the national exam yet. And about that $750. For some reason, my mother-in-law was so surprised that she turned to me for help. I don't understand what he's saying. This $750 payslip is yours, right? I decided there was no use hiding it anymore, and I replied, "No, it's not mine." My husband chimed in, "That's my salary from my part-time job." "That can't be! You're lying, right?" "I'm not lying. It's true. I'm not a doctor yet. I failed the national exam twice." My mother-in-law, shocked to find out her son was not a doctor yet, suddenly started acting strangely. She slipped on some newspaper ads she had scattered earlier while rummaging through our house and fell to the floor. "Help me!" She slid and fell, but managed not to hit her head by quickly putting her arm out. However, her right arm, the dominant one, broke with a loud snap. It was most definitely a fracture. My husband and I quickly treated her and took her to the hospital, where we guided her to the orthopedic department. But my husband said, "Mom, I'm sorry, but please don't come to our house anymore. And I don't want you to think of me as your son anymore." My mother-in-law was trembling from the shock of it all, but my husband continued, "I knew you were bragging about me, but I put up with it. I felt guilty for lying, but when you insulted the money I worked so hard to earn, that was too much. But I never would have guessed you weren't a doctor." "It doesn't matter if I'm a doctor or not. Do you think I'm studying just to say I earn $750 a day? I'm an adult, and it seems like we can't reconcile our differences in values, so let's cut ties." And so it seemed that my husband really decided to sever his ties with his mother. My mother-in-law, who had found her only purpose in life, boasting about her son, seemed to be completely disheartened. Nowadays, she stays cooped up in her house, apparently too embarrassed to face her neighbors. That same year, my husband successfully passed the medical licensing exam. Though he was a bit older, he started working as a newly minted resident physician and shone brightly, never forgetting to show kindness, such as offering tea to the security guards. Our days became very peaceful and happy. If she had just waited a few more months, my mother-in-law's dream would have come true, and she could have seen him in his white coat. It's really a pity, but she brought it upon herself.